Well, hi everybody, I'm Bill Whittle and this is Afterburner. I saw a couple things on the web this past week that would have been hilarious if I weren't crying so hard. James Cameron has just released Titanic in 3D 15 years after its original opening in 1997. And all across the web, on Facebook and Twitter, you can see thousands and thousands of millennials, or Gen 44s as Barack Obama has magnanimously rebranded them in his own image. Well, they're amazed. They're utterly amazed. The viral knowledge is spreading like wildfire that the Titanic story actually happened, and it wasn't just a movie plot. I find that unbelievably sad. And I was also doing a little recreational research on Apollo 11, and the number of young people who deny that the moon landings ever occurred is increasing nearly exponentially. Every time I go back to that poisoned well, I find more and more teens and young adults, American kids basically, who are ever more vehemently convinced that the entire thing never happened. Why? Well, they can't believe that nearly 50 years ago we were able to land on another world using slide rules and fuzzy black and white video, and today we can't even get into orbit with supercomputers and HD TV. You know, we have utterly failed these kids, this millennial generation. We have utterly failed them. And when I say we, I mean all of us. Now, most of it you can pin on leftist educational policies that turned the best public school system in the history of the world, one that produced the scientists, astronauts, and engineers that could put a footprint on the moon, into socially engineered, politically indoctrinated, so-called self-esteem factories that not only don't educate children, but in the end, don't even create self-esteem. The American public school system spends more and more money every year to produce worse and worse students. These kids don't know anything. They don't know when World War II happened, who was in it, or who was on what side. They don't know what Albert Einstein did. They think the Beatles stole Justin Bieber's hairstyle. They don't believe we walked on the moon, and they are amazed to discover that there really was a ship named Titanic and that it actually sank. I read what these kids have to say in various online forums, and more than anything, I am just stunned at how small their mental horizons are, how limited and sparse their view of the world really is. You know what else I worry about? I worry about this. I worry about this a lot. You know, I have firsthand experience taking millennials on boat rides or out to baseball games or even to Sequoia National Park, and in the middle of all of those wonders and miracles, they're just doing this. They're missing so much, you know. As a person who grew up without this, as someone who spent his childhood talking with friends for hours and hours on end, not chatting, not texting, but forging 40-year friendships by talking about deep and important things like girls and Star Trek. Well, I'm deeply concerned with how profoundly alone these super connected kids seem to have become. They have 900 Facebook friends, but I wonder how many of them would drive 4 hours in the middle of the night to pick them up if their car broke down. I know mine would. They don't believe we went to the moon, and why should they? I saw it with my own eyes. I watched it on TV in the Plaza Hotel in New York City with a roaring crowd of 100,000 people outside the window in Central Park. I saw Apollo 13 clear the launch pad with my own eyes. You know, if I'd been born just a few years earlier, I probably would have been a worthless hippie. And if I'd been born a few years later, I probably would have been a worthless hipster. But by sheer good luck, I landed in the middle of the space age, a time where risk, daring, skill, and confidence were in a perpetual positive feedback loop that, to the subset of my generation, the space age kids, meant that difficult is nothing and impossible, that just takes a little longer. It's very hard to spot signs of that kind of confidence, initiative, and risk-taking in this current generation. So, this millennial generation asks, and reasonably enough, it seems to me, if we really did do these things in the 1960s, well, why can't we do them now? Now that the computer and media technology is racing ahead so fast that the Apollo missions look like they were done in the 1800s. And now we get to the nub of the issue. Because this millennial generation has been told their entire lives that they are the brightest, most extra special generation ever, and they cannot psychologically come to grips with the fact that their grandfathers were so much smarter, bolder, imaginative, and better educated than them that they could land on the moon by doing the math basically in their heads. That's the cognitive dissonance that drives the moon landing denial. You know, like most of you, there are many people in this world that I deeply admire, but there are only 3 of them that I would actually call heroes of mine. One of them is Neil Armstrong. Another one is a geologist out in Arizona, and one of them is a man who wanted to fly in space, so he raised some money and built his own private space program. Now, this picture was taken in 2004 at Mojave Spaceport. That's the private spacecraft I mentioned. It's called Spaceship One, taxiing behind me. And the man who designed that is one of my three heroes. His name is Burt Rutan. And I admire Burt more than just about anybody in this world because he is the living embodiment of all of the qualities that I admire about space-age kids. Determination, imagination, skill, hard work, discipline, courage, blinding intelligence, and persistence. Burt Rutan solved the problem of suborbital flight for less money than the government would have spent identifying the problem. I'm just a product of the space age, but Burt Rutan launched a second one, and he did it in his garage. Now, this picture was taken about a month ago because Burt Rutan's become a friend of mine. I admire his hard work and attitude, and by some miracle that I can't explain, he seems to admire mine. And Burt and I have a lot of work left to do because we need to take those space-age values and bring them forward into this generation. Because there is an entire generation, maybe two by now, that has had their fundamental human gifts of wonder, ambition, and self-reliance beaten out of them by the progressive social engineers that have turned their education into a political brainwashing. There are bigger things to do in life than update your Facebook status or tweet movie reviews. I know there's not 1 in 100 young people watching this that's going to do anything other than thumb it down on YouTube, but to that 1 in 100 of you who's actually angry at how badly you've been ripped off by your educational system and you're willing to face it, let me say this, it's not over. It's not too late. Our best days are still ahead of us, and we're going to do great things. You mark my words. We need you, you 1 in 100. So educate yourself if you have to, the way Burt Rutan and I have. You can do it through the internet nowadays. Every single thing known to man is at your fingertips for free. But most of all, kid, hang in there.